Welcome back to Islam Channel, live news coverage of all the goings on in the Middle East, principally the Israel-Iran war, which is, well, it looks like it's come to an end now after 12 days, what Donald Trump calls the 12-day war. His intervention appears to have put the conflict on a pause, perhaps permanently. Could be for a few months. We don't know. It all depends on what happens next and who does what. And I've been interviewing a lot of people throughout my time over the last 12 days or so, Muslim thinkers, analysts, and also Muslim scholars. And so I have had people from a scholarly background giving me their views in terms of how Muslims should view this conflict. Who should they support? Should they be backing the Iranians after the attack by Israel? Should they be careful about backing the Iranians because of their role in Syria and other places? I've had Syrian guests who give me an opinion to say that you know, they are completely against Iran, even 5 times worse than the Israelis. And I've had others come on give a different view. Well, today I'm really pleased to say that I'm joined by Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi. He's live from Houston in Texas. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh, and welcome to Islam Channel.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Small correction, I was born in Houston, Texas. I'm live from Dallas, Texas. I'm living in Dallas these days.
There you go. You're in Texas and you're in the United States. My apologies for getting your birthplace and where you are mixed up. I think there are two huge cities and very nice cities as well. Sheikh, you gave a khutbah recently that has got somewhat viral about the escalation between Iran and Israel and that our duty is not to remain neutral. And I wanted to ask you, because a lot of Muslims around the world have been a little bit confused about where their loyalties should lie. Some even feeling guilty that they're supporting Iran in what many say is you know, an unprovoked conflict on Iran's part. They were not the aggressors, but because of Iran's past or their sectarian beliefs, then you know, they were unsure. I think more recently, in recent days certainly, I think the overwhelming majority of Muslims across the world were fully supporting Iran. But you intervened and you said that you clearly said in this conflict the aggressor is Israel. We need to put our disagreements to one side or put it on. You know, let's agree to put a pause onto the disagreements and eliminate the common enemy. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your khutbah?
Jayed, so first and foremost, thank you for having me. It's been a long time since I've been on Islam Channel, and I'm sure you're aware I was one of the first people to come on Islam Channel almost 20 plus years ago. So it's nice to be back, alhamdulillah. The khutbah that I gave, for the record, it was before the American involvement, so there's no reference to America as being read in with reference to America, because people are listening to it now. I gave it the day before America bombed, so it had nothing to do with that reality. That's a separate reality. And at the time, it seemed as if Israel and Iran are completely at odds with each other directly, without foreign intervention.
Yes.
And in that clear-cut case of aggression, my khutbah was intended to share, you know, my perspective. And I have to point out here that all too often, people who have political opinions, even if they're from a religious background, need to understand, including myself, that political opinions are not decisive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is okay to disagree, and it is okay to have different points of view. I respect my colleagues, my friends among the ulama community who have different opinions than I do. And I know they're coming from sincere places. And I hope they can afford me the same sincerity and good adab. Let us at least have a civil dialogue and agree to have different points of view and try to defend them. This is not Allah speaking about which side we should be on. We don't know. This is not the Battle of Badr, where you have the Prophet on one side and you have Abu Jahl on the other side. In that battle, there are no two opinions. You have to side with the Prophet against Abu Jahl. However, in these gray areas, it's okay to have differing points of view, and I presented my point of view. And that point of view is that when I heard the fellow clerics of mine, my friends, my colleagues, many of them, and people that I look up to across the Muslim world, come forth with statements in which either they were saying these are equally evil empires, or some of them were actually cheering on the attack of Israel against Iran. I really felt that this is a very shallow and incorrect analysis. This is my opinion. It is actually stemming from either very shallow misunderstandings of sectarianism or legitimate grievances, legitimate political grievances, legitimate anger for things that Iran has done. Either of these two cases we have to deal with separately. As for the sectarian card, as I explained in my khutbah, and I have said this multiple times, Sunnis and Shias, let's be very clear here, we do disagree about very core fundamentals. Those disagreements are so much that historically, the two communities have never had the same mosque anytime the critical mass has reached more than a bare minimum across the Muslim world.
Yeah.
You know, they've never shared the same mosque together unless, you know, the situation calls for it. And that's organically occurred. And I'm not even calling for that because the disagreements really are seminal. That having been said, should we foment sectarianism? Should we preach hatred? Should we rile up the masses against each other? I don't view that as being wise. Let us understand both of these strands are here to exist. Whether we like it or not, whether each strand likes it or not, they've been around for 1,000 years. Their interpretations of Islam are now solidified. They have developed holistic understandings of Islamic history and theology that appeal to their base masses. And to my fellow critics in this department, I just give you a thought experiment. Imagine if you had been born in the other household and raised in the other household and been fed a worldview completely disconnected from your own. Can you understand the possibility that that worldview might appeal to you? Because you've been fed a very different narrative. So they are coming from a different paradigm than us in terms of early Islamic history. So be it. I don't agree with that interpretation. But in the end of the day, in spite of my disagreements, they remain fellow Muslims. They believe in one God, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believe in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They believe in the Day of Judgment. They believe in the core pillars. Yes, they have views that are frankly troubling to me. I don't say they're correct, but what's the point of fomenting and riling up sectarianism and hatred? So they remain Muslims, number one. And then number two, politically, I said, historically, the grievances that some people have really are legitimate. They are legitimate. I don't at all defend the political alliances that Iran might have had with Syria, that the massacres that occurred by Bashar al-Assad and others, and clearly some elements of the Iranian elite and the politicians did support that. There's no defense there. But now Allah says in the Quran, let not the hatred of a group of people cause you to act unjustly.
Yes.
Let not the hatred of a group of people cause you to act unjustly. Act justly, that is the essence of piety. So, right now, in this conflict going on, you have a genocidal regime that hates all versions of Islam, that has killed almost 80,000 people, 20,000 of whom are children, that has incessantly bombed and pillaged and plundered and left no building standing. And on the other hand, you have an empire, a regime we have strong disagreements with, but in the end of the day, they are, as a default, their society is a society that believes in Allah and His Messenger. They pray, they fast Ramadan. The two cannot be considered to be equal, and we cannot become blind in our sectarianism or blind in our rage. Either of these two, we cannot afford to be blind in this regard. So, I am more nuanced here. I'm not saying unconditionally let us support Iran against Israel. I am saying in this particular conflict, without a doubt, the aggressor is Israel, and our sympathies lie with the Iranian peoples in particular, who are not the same as their politicians. The innocent people of the land of Iran, what have they got to do with this conflict? And they are being dragged in because of the oppression of Israel. So my point was that let not sectarianism and let not recent history cloud us to the maniacal, tyrannical, genocidal regime known as Israel, and let us be careful that we do not allow the hatred of partial issues of Iran and sectarianism to cloud that reality. That was my point.
Thank you, Sheikh. I mean, I listened to your khutbahs from here in London. I mean, I really enjoy them. I think they are They are not too long, not boring. They're very interesting, and they give me a lot of knowledge personally as a Muslim.
Thank you.
However, some of your critics, and my apologies in advance, I mean, I've got to put hard questions to you as well.
No problem, that's the whole point.
Some of the critics argue that religious leaders, such as yourself, should avoid giving political commentary to preserve the unity within the community. So how do you respond to those who feel that speaking out on geopolitical issues risks dividing Muslims even further?
So I prefaced my khutbah, the very first statement I said in my khutbah was that scholars are not geopolitical analysts. And that is why I'm trying to stay within my lane as much as possible. And that's why I am restricting myself to Islamic sectarianism and to the fact that on the one side you have Zionism and the other side you have Iman. Notice I'm talking more about theology and about Islam and the Ummah. And I want to keep it that way. As for the specifics of what Iran should respond and what is and how did Israel know on all of this, it's not my forte and I want to stay out of that. So should clerics become geopolitical experts? No, and I never said that. However, should people trained in the ethics of Islam, in the morality of Islam, in the theology of Islam, weigh in on when sectarianism is used as a card to divide? Without a doubt, that is our area of expertise, and let various scholars, give their perspectives, and let the average person listen to multiple perspectives and experts, because this conflict is not just about sectarianism. It's not just about Islamic theology. Islamic theology has one aspect. Allow me to share my views. Let other people be brought in who have other areas of expertise, and together let us form a more nuanced view about this very complex reality.
Isn't the issue that there are some Sunni Muslim scholars and organizations that claim that we need to remain neutral because of our disagreements, our political disagreements, and our religious disagreements with Iran and its clerical establishment? And
this is why I feel I cannot remain silent, and others who have this expertise cannot remain silent, because the other group is using the Islam card. They're using the card of religion and theology. And they're saying, based on their understanding of theology, this group is so heretical that they might as well be Zionists. That's basically what they're saying.
Oh, right? Sheikh, can I interrupt and say, I have had a very, very genuine Syrian opposition figure in London, and I've interviewed him many times in the run-up, during the Syrian civil war and in the run-up to their liberation. And he was absolutely adamant that Iran and its proxies were the worst thing that could happen to the Muslims. And I mean, I have to keep a neutral stance, and I tried to give him differing views, and others on my panel did so as well. But he was very, very clear, and I spoke to him after the show as well, and he said, look, you people simply don't understand what we went through in Syria.
And he's right, we don't. He's absolutely right. I am not speaking to him individually. But I'm asking you and others that you cannot expect the entire globe to have his worldview only. He is shaped by what happened to him and his family, and may Allah reward him for his sabr. May Allah grant whoever was, I don't know the brother, by the way, I'm just speaking generically. Whoever was persecuted, whoever was killed, may Allah grant them, firdaus and Jannah, whatnot. That is without a doubt. But that is an emotional argument though. And we don't blame people for having emotional arguments. That's a part of being human being. In fact, it reminds me, and I'm not trying to equate or compare, I'm just giving the notion here, of Wahshi, the person who killed the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, right, Hamza, that the Prophet always had something he couldn't, it's human nature. He had to embrace Wahshi's Islam, but he's like, you know what? The memory of all that you've done is too painful for me. When you're in my presence, sit in the back. Don't interact with me directly. Can you imagine? I mean, subhanAllah, and I'm not comparing and contrasting, but this is what I'm trying to say is that on the one hand, Wahshi has embraced Islam. He is technically exactly like all of the other Sahaba. On the other hand, what he has done has caused a particular pain and a particular grief to our Prophet ﷺ that is very painful. It's not easy to reconcile, emotional pain with realpolitik. It's not easy at all. And that is why I am saying those of our especially Syrian, brethren who have these views, honestly, I am not critical of them at all, and I give them the right to hold their worldview. All I'm saying is their worldview should not shape global worldview. I'm saying this politely, that their experiences, no matter how painful they are, it cannot be extrapolated to the entirety of the globe. We should learn. We should not be naive. And I say this bluntly, our disagreements with the current leadership of that country, we understand that they have different agendas than maybe other, regional, groups there. Nonetheless, in this current conflict, we cannot say the two are the same because they're not the same. This is my point here. There's shades, there's nuances. It's not a black and white. It's not a zero-sum game. And I do have strong disagreements theologically and politically with the Iranian side. Nonetheless, it is quite clear here that at this point in the time, and as I explained as well in my sermon, it is obvious, everybody knows this, the Zionist enterprise doesn't just want to target one label of the Muslim community. The Zionist enterprise wishes to gobble up every single group within the lands of Islam. They want to form a greater Syrian project. This is advertised on, their own channels, on their own news media. They want to gobble up every single Muslim region and power. And therefore, how can we be so naive as to fall prey to the standard colonialist tactic of divide and conquer? That was my point here. Let us, I didn't say come together. I said pause our internal issues. I didn't say ignore. I understand there are major issues we need to resolve. But for the time being, let us come together in order that we fight a common enemy for the both of us, right?
Yeah.
And that enemy is Zionism.
Yeah.
Once Zionism has been dealt with, then we can figure out how to solve our internal problems. That was what I was trying to say.
Yeah, you allude to Zionism's plan, and it was exposed by Israel Shahak, the Yinon plan in 1982, where what happens next. Well, what Zionism wants to happen next is the Muslim countries in its neighborhood are divided into sectarian cantons, and they can dominate them because,
exactly.
Absolutely. And I think what I find in your khutbahs is the fact that you are very clear. And in this particular khutbah, you emphasize moral clarity. Can you tell us a little bit more about moral clarity and what you meant?
So, again, this goes back to your question about the emotional anger that many people have. This is why I'm trying to invoke the moral argument here, that I'm not negating, I'm not dismissing the emotional anger. It is legitimate. And Allah knows best, if I had been tested the way that our Syrian brothers have been tested, maybe I would be saying exactly what they're saying. So I'm not, faulting them for that worldview. But I am saying that our Sharia teaches us to not respond emotionally, but to respond intellectually, to respond in a more nuanced manner. That's why I'm bringing in the moral argument here, that in the end of the day, even if this group is significantly different theologically, and even if they are guilty of injustice, and some segments are guilty of injustice, I'm not exonerating them at all. They are guilty of injustice. Still, the moral argument is the two are not the same. On the one side, you have not just, people who have rejected Allah and His Messenger, the worst of the worst. I mean, as I explained in my khutbah, this is like pharaonic type of kufr.
Yes.
We haven't seen this type of kufr for millennia, this downright barbaric, demonic evil. I mean, it's not even normal, just a regular, you live your life and let me be a kafir type of kafir. No, this is the worst type of arrogant, mocking kufr. That is literally pharaonic and satanic. It's that type of kufr. And on the other hand, you have people who, with their mistakes, still, do they not fast Ramadan? Do they not bow their heads to Allah? Do they not face the Qibla? Do they not do wudu? Do they not recite the Quran? So the moral argument is the two are not the same. How can you equate these two? Yes, there's theological differences. Yes, there's political grievances. But still, in the end, the two are not the same. The one side has Iman, even if it is flawed. And the other side is the worst manifestation of pharaonic kufr that we have seen for centuries. That was my point.
So how can Muslims ensure that in their activism and their advocacy, they remain principled and are not driven by the very sectarian forces or tribalism that you allude to?
Excellent question. I think one of the best ways to overcome this? Well, firstly, there's a spiritual component, and that is praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking for guidance. Even our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would constantly pray to Allah. There's a famous hadith in our books of Sunnah that in Salat al-Tahajjud, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, "Oh Allah, guide me to that which your creation has differed over. Guide me to the correct opinion, the ambiguous areas, the gray areas." Because, you know, in terms of Allah is one, the Prophet ﷺ is true, the Quran, there's no ambiguity. You are certain. In terms of political, forte, in terms of, the ambiguity of carving out relationships with other people, that's a very, very nuanced and black and gray area. So in that area, the Prophet ﷺ is saying, "Oh Allah, where the creation has differed, guide me to the best opinion." So first and foremost, let us all be humble. I am not saying that my opinion is definitively correct. I could be wrong. And let the other side also say, perhaps you're also wrong. Let us approach with a little bit of humility and a little bit of notion of Allah knows best. Secondly, of the most important mechanisms to overcome this issue of sectarian think, of group think, is to listen with an open mind to the opposing side. To not just be around your own group think, to not just create your own, circle, your own clique, your own yes men, your own self-validators, which is all too often the fundamental problem of sectarianism. How come sectarianism is so successful? Because most people within the sectarianist circles never venture beyond those circles. They're only remaining amongst similar-minded people. Hence, when a lie is perpetrated about the other group, it is constantly validated in their circles. Never is that lie exposed by a simple question to the other group and say, "Hey, do you actually say this? Do you actually believe this? We've heard that you guys supported such and such. Is that correct?" Let the other person speak on his or her own behalf and listen with an open mind. You might be pleasantly surprised that actually maybe you're incorrect, or usually, you will find out that what you've been fed is not a lie, but it is a half-truth. It is a distorted version of the truth. And once you understand the context of why the other group says what they say, you might not agree, but at least you will understand why they say what they say.
Okay.
So the second point is to approach the other person directly and to listen with an open heart and mind.
Okay. Well, Sheikh, I will ask you to pause there, because we're going to go on a very quick break. But as soon as we come back, I'm going to cover the role of Muslims in the West, including the use of social media, and also the very interesting race for the New York Democratic nomination, which even us here on the other side of the pond are so enthused about. Folks, don't go anywhere. I've got a very important guest with me, Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi, who everybody knows, and we'll be with him again straight after this. Welcome back to Islam Channel. We are having a really, really good discussion and debate with none other than Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi, live from Dallas in Texas. And he's been very kind enough to give us his time today to ostensibly talk about political matters, and also give us a fiqhi perspective on questions which many of you have been asking. You've been ringing into the show. We've had other scholars giving their perspectives, some even talking about whether we should, or questioning whether we should support Iran in this, or and bringing up this whole issue of the Sunni-Shia divide, which many people feel uncomfortable about. And Dr. Yasir, you've been very, very clear that we need to park our differences and perhaps, look at the bigger picture. But I put it to you that other critics, those who come from a pro-Israel perspective, say, what about for Jews that live in Israel, or we call it Palestine, but live in that land? What about their perspective that they've had to endure decades of fighting against extremism? This is their words, and they are the only democracy in the Middle East. They have Arab judges, politicians, and it's their national homeland, which was given to them by the powers after the Second World War. And they have ties with Muslim countries, Turkey, the UAE, even covert ties with Saudi Arabia, which even a genocide has not been able to break. So they are now integrated into that part of the world. What about having a truce with them?
So now you are delving into geopolitical realities,
Yeah.
and I feel that this is a little bit outside of my area of expertise. So I'm speaking from a moral perspective, a theological perspective,
Sure.
right? So allow me to then ask bluntly, what gives the League of Nations back in 1927 the right to carve out a prototype of what later became Israel in 1948? What gave England the moral authority to promise via the Balfour Declaration a land that had nothing to do with a bunch of Europeans to them if they supported England in World War I? So I understand the perspective of those groups of people from a political standpoint that, hey, the League of Nations and then the United Nations gave us, this portion of land. That's a political argument that they make. The response to that is, number one, what gave them the moral right? This is complete colonialist, enterprise taking place here. And number two, even if you wanted to go down that route, right, what the United Nations gave them was radically different than what exists today. In fact, they themselves have undertaken 3 separate wars. They have seen through the Nakbas. They have expelled over 1 million Palestinians over the last 60 years. And the United Nations did not ever ask for the open-air prison known as Gaza. The United Nations never asked for Jerusalem to be under occupation. So they are being very duplicitous, quite hypocritical, when they invoke the United Nations and yet do not live up to the very conditions that the United Nations gave upon them. So that's from a political standpoint. But again, that's not really my forte. Let me just go back and say, as a theologian and as a person who is more into Islamic, ethics and law and whatnot, I have to ask that this is a religious issue and question. They're invoking God. We're invoking God in this regard. They're not secular. This is a hypocrisy. The average Israeli actually believes that God has given them the land, right? And we as Muslims also believe that that land was given to the people who believed in Allah and the prophets. This is also our belief. These two beliefs are mutually exclusive. Both of them cannot be right. So this is why this is so problematic. I don't believe there's a simplistic political solution. That's why in the last 70 years, a number of people, United Nations, our governments, Clinton, others, they have attempted to carve out a secular peace. It's not going to happen when all sides are using religious arguments here. So I don't have a solution to the current problem. I will say they have dug themselves into this grave, not us. I will say the primary problem of that region is coming from the involvement of the United Kingdom from the beginning. That's your country. They're the ones who, in the Balfour Declaration, and who are championing our country, America, my country, got involved only after, the 60s. In the beginning, they were relatively neutral in this regard. Unfortunately, we can't really go back and change the past. I don't have a solution for the future. I do know that the current Zionist enterprise of Israel is not a full democracy. I have been to that country 7 times. I have seen with my own 2 eyes how Arabs are treated in that land. It is an illusion of a democracy. They might have a member of parliament that's an Arab. They might have a token judge that is an Arab. Everybody knows who lives there that there's a tiered level of justice. Everybody knows who lives there. There's a tiered understanding of power and power dynamics. This is soft apartheid if you are a citizen, and many people cannot become citizens. The people of Gaza cannot become citizens. The people that are living in what our own president, Jimmy Carter, called the largest open-air encampment in the world. Nelson Mandela, who lived through apartheid, he said that what is happening to the Palestinians is in some ways worse than the apartheid that we blacks faced in South Africa. This is Nelson Mandela speaking. So please, anybody who comes to you and says Israel is a democracy, they are either absolutely ignorant or they are lying. Most likely is the second case. They're absolutely lying. Go and see with your own eyes the reality of living in that land, and you will realize there is no full democracy. Frankly, even now, as we speak, there's video footage of the bunkers in which Israelis are turning people away of different ethnicities, of not even Muslims, non-Muslims that are Christians or whatever. They're turning them away from the bunkers, saying these bunkers are only for, Jewish people. So no, I'm sorry. This is a facade. It is a blatant lie. That country is not giving equal rights. To be fair, if they gave equal rights to everybody and everybody had human dignity, honestly, that would be a different conversation. But they don't. and they're treating non-Jewish people worse than they treat animals. The people in Gaza are treated worse than animals. I'm sorry, we cannot remain silent. And our faith and our conscience tells us we must speak up for the sake of Allah and then for the sake of history.
Indeed, I mean, a lot of what you said about Israel and its nature has been documented by international human rights organizations such as Amnesty International and
Precisely.
Human Rights Watch, and also the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, where they do charge Israel with having an apartheid system. So, Sheikh, we completely understand your point of view, but I wanted to give you an alternative perspective and share your views on that perspective. Look, across the world, Muslims are hurting. We have a unique sense of ummah. It's been there, cultivated from the early days of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we're now in the age of nations. So how do you see the role of transnational solidarity evolving in an age where national interests, and I have a great example, I come from an Indian Muslim perspective, so my fellow, my cousins and those that are in India, their national interests conflict sometimes with the interests of India. This India-Pakistan recent war was a great example. And we saw leading Indian Muslims, people I respect actually, like Asaduddin Owaisi, taking a very pro-Indian view in terms of that particular conflict. So give us give us some, or educate us in terms of that particular question. How do you balance that?
Yeah, these are very difficult questions to answer, and I'm not somebody who speaks in tropes and slogans. One of my problems is I like to be nuanced and precise, and generally speaking, it's not easy to be precise in 30-second sound bites. These types of topics require detailed discussion and analyses. In a nutshell, though, I would suggest that let the scholars of every single region, let the senior ulama who are trustworthy and who have track records that demonstrate, inshallah, sincerity and integrity and common sense and wisdom, let them come together in times of crises and let them discuss each and every situation as it arises. Because no one can give a specific, mathematical equation about how Muslims of a region should interact when things are happening around the world. It's a very, very difficult debate. By the way, my ancestors are also from India. Both of my parents were born in India. I still have, third cousins in India. Sure. I know my ancestral village. I've been there as well. I've been to India multiple times. Not anymore. Obviously, I've been banned by the current regime of that country from entering for the last decade. But I am well aware to a great extent about the reality of Indian Muslims. Now, you are Indian Muslim as well. What would you expect an Indian Muslim to do given the reality of the dynamics of the land, given that the BJP is in power, given that there is a potential genocide that might be underway in a few years? How should they try to prevent that genocide? By acting wisely and sensibly. The religion does not ask them to act foolishly. And if they need to, preserve their integrity by remaining aloof, or by making generic statements, because we're not allowed to play duplicitous games. We are not allowed to pretend something and say something else. We are people of faith and conscience. And what we believe, we say. And so we have to have a clear agenda forward. What exactly is the future of Indian Muslims? I can't speak to that because I'm not actually an Indian Muslim. Ethnically, I might be, but I haven't lived there. I can speak to American Muslims for sure. And I speak to British Muslims because we are pretty much in the same, category of socio-political realities. And that is, our goal in these lands is not to overthrow the systems and to supplant it with Islamic caliphate. I have been very public about this, and I chastise those fringe groups that, wave that flag and say, our goal is this. No, that's political suicide, and that's not what we learned from the seerah. The Prophet in Mecca never said, I'm here to destroy your entire, land and overtake it. No, our role and our goal in these lands is to preach the truth and to make sure that our children preserve our faith. That is what our role and goal is, right? To be role model citizens, to be voices of conscience. We're not forcing anybody. We're not imposing our will on anybody, but we must be paragons of virtue. We must exude and demonstrate prophetic characteristics in a land that has abandoned the characteristics of the prophets of Allah. That is what our role is, right? And Whoever wishes to accept, alhamdulillah. Whoever doesn't, that is on them, and we leave their fate to the hereafter. So I'm very clear here. Our role in these lands is not to politically overthrow the system. That's not what we're here for. No, our role is to preserve our faith, pass it down to our children, live our lives, and give back to our communities as much as our faith, allows us to do. Because again, there are certain things we don't want to get involved with. We're not going to get involved with the pub culture, with the licentiousness. That's not a part of our culture. But civic, duty, helping the healthcare system, helping the education, building the infrastructure. Yes, why not? It is my land. It is your land. Let us come together, build a better society for our people, and be voices of conscience and morality. This is our job and role, and we will continue to do that and influence the same way that everybody else is influencing. And I said this in the sermon, and it has gotten backlash from the far right, from the MAGA supporters, but I will continue to say it. As an American citizen, born and raised in Texas, I have just as much right to attempt to shape my foreign policy as you do. I speak to the MAGA, supporters, the Donald Trump supporters, the pro-Israeli and Zionist supporters. I have that right too. This is not a sinister agenda. It is a public, constitutional, civic responsibility. I don't want my country to be involved in another war in the Middle East. I don't want my country to send bombs on people. I want it to build schools for my children. I have the right to lobby, to petition. I have the right to support people in Congress that are presenting my worldview. That is the same constitutional right you in England have and everybody else in the Western democracies have. We as Muslims should not shy away from this. The far right says you have a hidden agenda. I say no, we have a clear-cut agenda, not a hidden. And that agenda is, I want my society to flourish, to be morally upright, to not get involved in genocides and wars. And if you have a problem with that, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why are you so gung-ho about genocide and about supporting wars and foreign invasions? For far too long, especially after 9/11, for far too long, us Muslims have been intimidated to be involved in shaping our own public discourse. That time should be in the past. Let every Muslim realize that how can you be ashamed to be Muslim in the current climate? How can you cower away and not get involved? In your own country, so many things are going on, so many debates are happening. Get involved in the debates within the legal manner. Get involved in the conversation. Stand up and let your voice be heard as a part of the system. Take ownership. You are not an other. You are not outside. Are you not paying taxes? Are you not living in that land? Are you not a part of society? Well then, claim ownership. Don't cut off and don't disconnect. Claim ownership and then do what every other civic-minded person does, and that is try to influence, try to make a change, try to make a difference within the system. If everybody did that, can you imagine, the impact we would have? So embrace who you are, embrace your potential, and try to achieve the best with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Sheikh, we're in the age of social media. The last decade has seen the way people digest information, get their news, get knowledge has completely been transformed. You can sit on your phones, it's in your hand, you can watch it when you go home on a bigger screen, but we are interconnected as a human race like no other time in history. So what's your advice to perhaps younger Muslims who are having to navigate very complex issues, perhaps regarding the Israel-Iran war or the genocide in Gaza and many other areas, not just those that I've mentioned? What's your advice to them in terms of making sure that they do it with wisdom and integrity?
So I go back to something I said to you earlier, and that is, do not just remain within your own self-constructed imaginary bubble. Do not just listen to your own social circles that you've already grown accustomed to. Listen to differing points of view, and even if you disagree, at least you will become a little bit more mature, a little bit more wiser, and you'll be able to effectively argue and convince other people because you've heard the other side. One of our biggest problems is, and this is one of the problems of social media, the algorithms, right? It will feed you content that it knows you want. And that is why, by the way, a side point here, that it's so ironic that two people sitting on two computer terminals next to each other, if they just scroll for 5 hours on Facebook, on social media, on Twitter, within a few hours, the algorithms will pick up their viewing habits and they will start feeding them news media and information that is radically different, even though they're physically sitting next to each other, right? We both know this. We all understand this reality. Our, Muslim young youth need to understand the same thing, that understand your worldview is a skewed worldview because you're only listening to 3 people. You're only watching 2 news sources. Go ahead and broaden your horizons. Understand why people say what they do, and then learn to understand the arguments so that even if you disagree, you can refute them better. That's my first point here. Broaden your horizons. My second point, just as crucial, in fact, even more crucial. Understand social media is I'm not going to say a fake world, but it is not real. Understand when you log online, you enter a virtual reality world that has little to no actual impact. My strong advice and suggestion, keep social media limited and engage in the real world in a more positive manner. Social media should be 10-15% of your day. The rest of the day should be actually involved with an community that is in flesh and blood, a group of people, an organization, an institute, a masjid, a civic center, a shelter, anything where you actually physically get involved with other people, because you will realize very quickly when that happens that the world that you imagined on social media is an imaginary, self-constructed world. It doesn't impact the actual flesh and blood, the walking in the streets, the getting involved in the grassroots. That is the real world of physical people, of objects, of human beings, of interactions, of friendships, of impacting people, of bringing smiles to people's faces, of actually leaving a legacy. That is where the real work is done. If you do not get involved with actual living human beings, it is so easy to go down an imaginary path, an imaginary world, and generally speaking, that will be for your detriment and your negative. Never think that the online world that you become immersed in is going to impact the actual real world. The two are separate. And because there's a lot of reasons for this, social media gives you this false anonymity, this bravado that you would never have, this alter ego that comes out that would never actually come out in the real world. So minimize social media. I'm not saying avoid it. I'm also involved with it. And by the way, I think 2-3 years ago, I made an announcement on leaving social media. For 2 years, I was completely off. Recently, I've gotten back maybe an hour a day, and I'm a little bit interacting. But those 2 years, subhanAllah, I wrote 3.5 books, half because when it's going to be finished soon. I accomplished so much lectures, alhamdulillah. I felt a huge sense of relief and burden off my shoulder. And I really think that I'm going to be repeating this cycle every once in a while, just taking a i'tikaf, you know, from social media and getting some real work done, inshallah.
Sheikh, we're coming towards the end of this interview, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. But I have to ask you, I mean, New York is one of the great cities of the world, just like London, and it's somewhere which is never out of the news for many, many different reasons. We know at 9/11 it suffered a horrendous disaster when obviously so many people died through the Twin Towers being bombed. But we are now looking 20 years later, 2 decades later, perhaps if tonight it goes the way which many pollsters think it might go, and many people, many Muslims living in the West are so enthused about the rise of Zohran Mamdani, a very open Muslim, somebody who's very clear, has a lot of moral clarity, like you've obviously always shown, is very clear on his positions on issues such as Palestine and many other issues as well. And he's a socialist, and he's very proud of being a socialist as well. If he wins, does this give credence to the fact that Allah commands us never ever to lose hope, even in the darkest of moments, even when a genocide is going on, because he is the best of planners?
Yeah, and there's no doubt that these types of mini victories bring a sense of relief. Obviously, this isn't the victory of Palestine that we wanted. I mean, Mamdani, and this is we have to also be clear here. The right, MAGA supporters, Zionists, are bringing in Palestine into the New York mayor race. I just tweeted today, you know, on a comedy show. You know, Mamdani is asked point blank, do you think Israel has the right to exist? And I so wish, I know he's a politician, I so wish he pushed back and said, excuse me, why are you asking that question? I'm running for New York's mayor. I'm not running for Israel's office. What has that got to do with my office of New York mayorship? But no, because he's a Muslim and because he's a brown skin and some weird name according to the eyes of these people, he's getting asked these preposterous questions, subhanAllah. So we also have to be careful here and not read in a Palestinian victory, you know, if Mamdani, you know, wins. it will show that there are sensible people in the world, in New York. There are sensible people that are not bigoted, and they're looking at policies. If Mamdani is voted in, he was voted in not because being a Muslim, but in spite of being a Muslim. And that's the victory here. That he's not voted because he's a Muslim. He's not voted because he's saying that, I'm a Muslim heritage. It's because he has policies that appeal to large segments of the people. And so we are grateful that still there's common sense in so many people. And again, I have to say this, for the record here, that these types of political realities should bring about higher level conversations amongst the Muslims in England and America, because unfortunately, all too often, we are our biggest critics and our biggest impediments. I know this happened in the UK as well. When senior Muslim politicians were elected, their biggest critics came from within our own community, and they were cancelled. In fact, I heard there was even, you're outside the fold and you're a kafir and this and that, for statements that might have been incorrect or whatnot. But people are not understanding that politicians are not shuyukh. If this guy's elected, I don't know him personally, I'm just saying, if this guy is elected, I don't expect him to give fatwas about halal and haram. He's not my reference for Islamic law. He's a mayor of New York. And as the mayor, I understand. I don't condone. I'm not saying there's a green light. I understand he will have to do and say things that mayors do that I, as sheikh, will never do. Sure. I don't like that he's doing this, but I can't criticize him for being the mayor if he won the office of being the mayor. And I have to understand there's going to be baggage. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying there's good and bad. And we have to be more mature in this regard. If Mamdani becomes the mayor of New York, do not you and I and other Muslims see this is such a positive sigh of relief that bigotry is not that rampant. That, alhamdulillah, in London and New York, the two largest Western civilizational cities in the globe, their peoples have elected by common vote mayors that happen to be of Muslim heritage, not because they're Muslim, but in spite of their Islam. Is that not a victory at a civilizational level? Now, some cleric comes along, some, mashallah, very pious, muttaqi, and I'm not making fun of them, but just saying that the worldview is, coming from a particular paradigm, and judges the mayors of New York as he would judge his local sheikh. I'm sorry, you're using the wrong judgment ruler here.
No, very true, very true.
You just have to be more broad-minded in this regard, and I'm not condoning. Mistakes will be made by these politicians. They have to answer to Allah. I don't want to make those mistakes, but I'm saying there's also good that will come out. Let us try to maximize and celebrate the good, and let's try to work within the system to try to minimize that bad. Allah knows best.
Well, Sheikh, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time once again. It was very informative for me. I'm pretty sure most of our viewers will be saying a lot of good things from what they've heard you say. There's always going to be critics, there always are, but I think those will be in the very, very small, in the very small minority. Sheikh, continue the great work you do, and I look forward to hearing your next khutbah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you. Folks, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, and I'll see you again tomorrow.